cause Novell to have a situation where it just kind of tries to free the SUSE project and have it disengaged from the entire issue. And that hasn't happened yet. So you actually still stay in a situation where the same issues, although we're not really in a position to try and judge how effective the boycott was or how effective it is at present. I think that it's important to actually keep the message alive and to at least until things get resolved.
So I believe the Boycott Novell was founded in November in 2006 by a guy called Shane Coyle.
Yeah.
And Shane's actually been one of the biggest detractors of the site. I mean, he said that when he founded the site, he wanted to, quote, take part in intelligent discussions on the Microsoft Novell deal and its subtle yet severe implications. And then he quit in December 2008, shortly after you joined. Actually, you joined in 2006, didn't you? He quit in 2008. And he's in a comment, he cited that Boycott Novell was a program to, quote, eradicate all contrary opinion, even those who are armed with facts, and cajole and antagonize them. And he's been very critical of your stewardship of the site. Do you feel like you've driven it in the wrong direction?
In 2007, actually, I didn't really find much time to be on the website and to actually post much because it was barely on the internet, sometimes for about a month. And he sort of, I think, he actually lost track of some things that were happening, and certain people who are regulars in the site actually did try to explain to him, even send him, emails to him, trying to explain certain misconceptions he had. So in 2007, for example, I think it was 2007, there was a certain protest in India, which he thought was somehow connected to us, which it wasn't. So because he wasn't keeping track of the website in general. So when he made this sort of comment, he was under certain impressions of things that were happening, which weren't exactly happening. And another thing that he was a bit critical of was the attitude towards the Mono project, for example, because he wasn't quite so sure that the FSF would disapprove of the project, which, as we found out in, I think it was in July or June this year, they actually do have some issues with that, namely because of patents. So that's not really the main issue with Mono. It's more to do with control of the frameworks of programmers and. But
it sounds like what you're saying though is that there's the founder Shane Coyle. You're saying that as if he kind of got it wrong. And when I reference this flood of criticisms about bringing you on FLOSS Weekly, you said that they got it wrong as well. I mean, do you think that there's maybe the vague possibility that these people haven't got it wrong and that maybe you've got it wrong?
Well, in the case of Shane, he got some facts wrong when he actually made this specific comment. I think it was in 2008, and it happened when the war. I think, actually, let's try to put this in context. I think it was about a month or weeks after the protests in India. And he also was under the impression that the guy got arrested there, which is not true. So this is another kind of distortion, and perhaps somebody told him the wrong story. I'm not quite so sure if somebody was trying to feed him the wrong story about what was happening, because it wasn't the case. The real story was that some guys went to a conference about free software, and Novell was there, and they decided to make a certain stance against the company, which they did. And although it was done in a very friendly, kind of non-violent fashion, one of the guys was basically removed by the police. He wasn't arrested or anything, but they just, it's not even police, it's more like officers that just kind of attend the place. And this was distorted by people who were trying to make it seem like it was some kind of an extreme event or something like that. And more to the point, it had nothing to do with me. I didn't even know about this until after it had happened. So Shane was under the impression that we have some kind of a campaign going on, getting people to protest and things like that, which just wasn't true. So yeah, I mean, it's things like that, which afterwards, when I spoke to him, it was fine with it. I think one of the issues he had even over a year before is he just didn't find much time to actually go on the site and to post things, and it was me doing like 90%, even more than 90% of the posting. So
Okay, so let's spin back a little bit. I mean, What do you feel are the primary missteps that Novell has made? I mean, you've mentioned Mono and you've mentioned the deal. Are those the two primary problems that Boycott Novell has with Novell?
I think it's really the same things that we were talking about within days after the deal had been signed. So we're talking about issues like the use of fat tactics to try and market their product, Enterprise Linux, which, you know, they were actually doing this just weeks ago. And the whole plan they have with virtualization, the plan with Mono, and all sorts of things that are very much beneficial to Microsoft. Now, Novell actually tries to show off the benefits of the deal, which basically usually means things that are beneficial to Microsoft, and Microsoft in turn compensates Novell for. Now, there is no question about the deal perhaps being beneficial to Novell. Since the beginning, Novell was in a very desperate situation when it got into the deal, even with the banks and everything else.
Right.
And so from the point of view of the investors, I'm sure it's very good, but, you know, Novell is really a private company, and it's not really driven by goodwill, although, you know, public relations might make it want to seem so. But Novell's interests were good for itself, and definitely good for Microsoft, but for the suppliers of Novell, the people who actually write the code and promote the code and try to advance a certain interest and to actually advance the desktop of, you know, the new Linux desktop.
But are you basically saying, therefore, that because Novell has a deal with Microsoft, that means that Novell is not good for Linux?
It's very problematic because I probably don't have to tell you that Microsoft is the company that does more damage to free software than many companies combined. And it's very obvious to see that. If you look for evidence, even just very recent evidence, you probably find things like...
Sure, but I mean, yeah, but I'm sure that Coca-Cola destroys rainforests, but if I drink a can of Coke, it doesn't mean I'm going to destroy a rainforest. I mean, does that necessarily mean that Novell's doing bad things for Linux?
It's doing a bit of both, but you have to remember that as a Linux open source company, Novell is just doing thumbs. Well, in terms of revenue, the component of Novell, which is to do with these things, is just something like 10%, I think 10-20% maximum. And if you look at Novell's interest and how it's actually working on proprietary software at the same time for the vast majority of its revenue, then you come to just realize that Novell is not necessarily a Linux company. It wants to describe itself this way because it works well with customers. They think, you know, this is a company that's very, you know, frank with the community. It's got all these supporters, and it's going to remove lock-in. But the reality is, Novell is actually a proprietary software company. It calls itself a mixed source company.
Right. But it's also, I mean, in Novell's defense, and it's sweetly ironic because I work for Novell's competitor, so this is kind of an unusual situation.
I like it that you're defending them. That's good.
And, you know, but... you know,
very open-minded of you, Jono.
Yeah, and it's like Novell has done. I think none of us would disagree that the Novell deal with Microsoft was disappointing at best. But, I mean, what about the incredible contributions that Novell has made to upstream software? What about Greg KH working on the kernel? What about Aaron Buckover working on Banshee and Moblin? And what about Miguel working on Mono? Whether you agree or disagree, it's all free software. What about all the contributions that they've made to XGL and all these many different areas? One of the reasons why my Windows wobble right now is because of Novell. I mean, surely it's not a one-sided story. I mean, they've made some mistakes, but they've also contributed a huge amount to free software. A lot of the code that is running my computer right now and a lot of the code that is running your computer right now was written by Novell. Surely that's something that we should be very conscious of in this debate.